my talk, Vagrant Up Your Environment. Before I start, I want to know who's using Vagrant. Raise your hand. Okay, who's using Puppet? Any other configuration system? Salt? Ansible? Okay, cool. So, all right, great. So I'll introduce myself. My name is Yann. I'm an independent consultant for FooLab. I specialize in project rescue, and I'm also very active in the community. I organized the Confu conference in Montreal. It used to be the PHP Quebec conference that I founded in 2003. So yeah, Confu is happening in the end of each February. So you can check out the website later on if you're interested. You have my Twitter handle and my email. So if you have any questions, comments, feedback, please send them to me. It's very important. Helps improve. My presentation objectives are very simple. I want to improve the quality of software. I want to lower the time needed for quality assurance for software, reduce the time needed to configure servers, and speed up the time to, I want you to spend more time to solve real problems, because that's what we're hired for. Yeah. This lightning is very weird. So what you will learn in this presentation is how to manage software with Vagrant and Puppet, do provisioning with VirtualBox or in the cloud on DigitalOcean. I am a customer of DigitalOcean, so I'll show you that. Install packages with Puppet, how to configure them, use templates, and write reusable scripts, because automating is good. So what is VirtualBox? VirtualBox is a hosted hypervisor. It means it requires an operating system to run. Compared to VMware has other products that don't require an operating system, but this is more for like corporate usage. Cloud hosting companies will use that, for example, or very large companies that have a lot of hardware that they want to share to their users. Puppet is a configuration management system. Just like some of you have mentioned, there are other ones than Puppet. There is Salt, there is Chef. You can use Bash to configure your system. And Vagrant simply does the provisioning. It just tells Vagrant to execute those commands on the server. So why use Vagrant and Puppet? First scenario is you have multiple developers, and you have a loose policy. So you have people running Windows, Windows, Linux, Mac, whatever system, because developers were very picky about our operating system. People install different versions of PHP because they like to play with different versions. It's fun, it's cool, it has different features, new features. We all want to try it. And then you have different extensions or different software installed. And developers start installing those and playing with those and integrating them in software. And then things starts to break in production, obviously. So you want to standardize your environment. You want to take control. And without having to giving administrator rights every time you want to install a new package or install new software. Another great scenario is when you have new employees coming in. Your boss forgot to tell you there's 3 new employees joining your company next Monday, and it's Friday. That's very boring. So you have better time to do than to spend all that time setting up those machines. You want to automate that because it's very time consuming. Or you want to streamline your environments on production, and you want to spin new VMs very quickly. So you can get the software, most of the software at these URLs. Vagrant, VirtualBox, and Puppet. I use the community edition of Puppet. It's good enough for me. The Enterprise Edition has more features, more reporting that tells you when things were done, that kind of stuff. So if you need it, I think it's free up to 10 nodes. So where to get boxes for Vagrant? Because you need them. The creators of Vagrant is HashiCorp. They publish a few boxes there. Usually I stick to the boxes that are the official boxes for one very simple reason: security. So usually if I take a box from HashiCorp, I know it should work. Boxes on the Vagrant box, I would be careful. Anybody can publish there. Personally, I stick to the Ubuntu official boxes. I know they're clean. I know they're just have Puppet installed and they work. I'm willing to pay the extra. I'm willing to put the extra time to do the extra configuration myself. So some of the commands to some of the basic commands for Vagrant. Basically, first you need to do Vagrant init. We just give it a name and then a URL to that box that we want to download. It's going to generate a Vagrant file that I will show in the next example. And then the next step is Vagrant up. So we want to fire up that virtual machine. Doing Vagrant up will also do the provisioning for you automatically. And then you have like the usual alt, suspend, resume, reload. But what is interesting is Vagrant SSH. So you just run Vagrant SSH with the name of the box, and it's going to log you in automatically on that box. That's great. So you don't have to generate your SSH key. Just put it on that server, or just remember that crazy password, or just write it on a Post-it. Don't do that. And then Vagrant provision. Like I said, it pretty much takes all your Puppet manifest and tells the virtual machine, tells Puppet to execute them. Vagrant destroy, Vagrant rebuild. Destroy deletes the virtual machine. Everything is gone. So if you made changes, bye-bye. Rebuild, basically, it does a destroys and does an up. So just one command. And Vagrant package is fun. So it's very cool because if you've spent all that time building that Vagrant machine, writing all those Puppet manifests, and now it's in a good state, you like how it is. So what you do Vagrant package. There are a couple options that you can check in the documentation, but you can do a package, and that will create your another Vagrant box that you can distribute to your coworkers or whoever on the internet. So people could just do Vagrant init with the name of the box and the URL. So they don't have to re-execute all those manifests over and over, so saving time. So creating a box. Since naming is hard, and we've been naming things foo, bar, baz for way too long. Hang on. What? Oh, I turned this off. So we've been naming things for foo, bar, baz for way too long. Say hello to Waldo. Okay, not too many people know Waldo. You never managed to get that far down.
See him in the crowd.
Yeah. Okay. But yes, it's very far down after foo, bar, baz, qx, and such. Then you have Waldo and Fred, and so yeah. I just wanted to point out that point that out. So, anyways, so we do our Vagrant up, Vagrant init with the name Ubuntu Vivid 64, which is the latest Ubuntu 15.4.04. I added a little bit.ly, but it's really the points out to that Ubuntu box. That will generate a huge configuration file. Here is just a little, I removed all the comments because there's a lot of stuff in there. You can read through, it's a great there's a lot of great comments to understand that you can learn from, but it's very, very simple. So, but what we want to do with this file is we want to be able to configure it to name the machine, set the RAM, CPU, shared folder, network, configuration, your configuration manager, and your hypervisor, such as Vagrant, Vmware, and such. So how we do this, basically here you have your shared folder. It's very simple. And what you want to do, you want to tell your hypervisor the name of the box. Because if you don't specify it, what happens is VirtualBox will name the box for you, and it's going to be a name that you can't remember. So it's important to specify it. When you have multiple machines, it's pretty cool. You know that Waldo is the Waldo box. You also specify the memory, CPU, and then at the bottom we say we configure Puppet. We tell it that it's in the Puppet folder and in the manifest, and then you have the manifest file site.pp. So Puppet use resources, and here are a couple examples of resources that I've included in our first manifest. For example, we installed the package Apache 2. Well, the resource is named apache.package, and the name of the package is Apache 2. And we make sure it's installed. And once it's installed, we notify the service Apache. That service is actually, we make sure that it's always running and it's enabled. So that means if you restart your Apache, you restart your virtual machine, your Apache is going to be running. So that's great. You don't have to worry about it. And then we install PHP 5. Obviously, I'm a PHP user. So we install PHP 5, and it requires the package Apache. So if for some reason someone went and deleted the Apache and wanted to replace it with Nginx, for example, well, it's going to reinstall Apache for you. And it's going to reload the Apache software once it's done installing. So it knows it can handle Apache files now, PHP files now. So Puppet is made out of manifest and modules. Modules enables you to group things. The same for classes. So you can group all your PHP stuff together, all your Apache things together, all your Python. So that's great. Me personally, I like when things are in order. And you have defines. Defines are pretty much like functions that you can reuse, or you can call through different manifest or different classes. Some of the resources type I've shown so far: the packages, the services, but we also have files. Files is great for configuration files. For example, your PHP INI, or creating directories. You also have cron jobs, the crons that you can set up, or exec. I know a lot of people don't like exec for one simple reason, because it's out of the scope of Puppet. So you don't quite know what's happening. It's a bash script that is running, or it's whatever script that is running. However, it gets the job done when needed. You probably already have that script, and you just want it running. So you don't want to rewrite all your bash script into manifest right away. And then there's users and groups and things like that. So creating our first module. Any questions so far? No? OK. So creating a first module is actually somewhat simple. So we tell that we want we create different folders like Puppet modules and our PHP module, and we have a manifest folder. I will show you later how it all looks up together. And we create a template folder which I will show a little bit later as well. And then we create a file init.pp. It's important to name it this way. Vagrant is going to be looking for that file. And then we have a file structure, a folder structure that looks like this. So now we have a Vagrant file that looks similar to this. And in our modules are now here's our site.pp. Here we have our Puppet modules. And I added some Puppet options here, which is parser future. The future parser is actually by default in Vagrant in Puppet 4. But since I'm a very conservative person, I still run Puppet 3. But I still enable it just for some additional feature I'll show you later. And I added an option, debug. That's interesting because it's going to show you exactly every command that it's running on your system with every option. So it's good for debugging, and it's good for learning what your system is actually doing. Our previous site.pp file looked like this. When you have many resource definition, it gets very messy quickly. So what you want to do is include your different modules. So here I include a PHP module that I will show you. And I included my Apache module and stdlib. stdlib is a Puppet module that you can add. It gives you access to different functions that can be very nice to loop over arrays and things like that. So now we have this module, PHP. It's very similar to as I shown you earlier. Nothing changed much. I just installed a different, an extra PHP extension. But what's the problem with this? Anybody can see a problem? Because this you will see a lot on the internet. Yeah?
It might try to install PHP 5 Cron for PHP 5 install. Never mind, you're good. But it could do it before Apache is installed.
If it could, but it will check if it has if it tries to install curl, it's going to look for it's going to require the PHP package, so it's going to install it first.
It doesn't require Apache though.
It doesn't require Apache. That's a mistake of my slides.
Okay.
I fixed it actually a little bit later. But the real problem is we hard-coded PHP 5. So the day that you want to reuse that same Puppet script on the Red Hat, for example, it's not going to work. But you're going to find that all over the internet on all the examples. We're programmers. We're better than hard-coding values all over. So also, the current approach that I've shown, it manages one. It's specific to an OS. We have names of packages and services hard-coded everywhere. It's specific to one virtual machine. What if you want to have different manifests for different machines? How do we do that? Well, my approach is write manifests once, reuse, configure them once, configure them always. The way to do this is with configuration hierarchy. Aria is a key store engine for Puppet, which support JSON and YAML. It's pretty cool. So what happened is you can. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. So now. I should have. So now here I add an extra. Clicker. So now I have I added an extra configuration for my Yara file, configuration file, and that file looks like this. It's very simple. So You specify your backend. I specify JSON because JSON is much more readable than YAML. And then I define my hierarchy of configuration. So if I have multiple nodes, I can define different configurations for these nodes. For example, I can have my Waldo box and my Fred box. Yes, Fred is further down the road. OK, foo, bar, baz, Waldo, Fred. I invite you to look it up on Wikipedia. It can be interesting. So anyhow, so I could have my configuration for Waldo and a specific configuration for Fred, and a default configuration that is called common. So if a configuration is not found for my node, it's going to default to the common. So that's pretty cool. So now let's configure that Waldo box using Yara. Here I used I used one key just to show that we can use arrays later down the road. But it's good that you define multiple keys, especially for your PHP configuration. Here in this case, I specify the name of my service, where my PHP INI will be, error reporting EAL, display errors off, and the error logging. And I want to install a couple packages, a couple PHP extensions, 0MQ, curl, and xdebug, because debugging is hard. And now we have our, we modify our initial PHP module to make it generic. We use Yara to do a key lookup. That will give me all my configuration. And now my PHP module is much more reusable. I have my package name here. And here I install all my extensions in just one loop. I look if I have a hash of extensions. I loop through them and install them. So instead of having package install PHP 5 curl, and then another package to install xdebug, and another package to install 0MQ, it generates very, very long manifest. And now we want to change the values in our PHP INI, because hard-coded values there, we want to customize that PHP INI. So we add another resource, which is a file resource, and we use the template. And it's a php.ini.erb. ERB is a Ruby templating system. So here what will happen, I will be able to call my PHP variable in that template. Whenever I change my configuration, so for example, if I want to turn on error reporting, it will notify the Apache service and reload Apache. The templating is pretty simple. So in this case, error reporting, I just access my array like this. Very simple. If you've been doing programming or any templating things, that's what it is. And now running multiple, our initial Vagrant file was to manage one server. A lot of people sometimes just add another block to define another node and another configuration. I find that very weird because we're programmers. A Vagrant file is actually Ruby stuff. So what about just putting your configuration in a JSON file and simply looping over it and configure it? It's that simple. So now with this little modification to your initial Vagrant file, you can do vagrant up waldo.box, vagrant up fred.box, and so on and so forth. It's just a small modification. Well, your next step, before you're a millionaire, you got to go in the cloud, obviously. So you can provision on Amazon, DigitalOcean, Linode. Like I said earlier, DigitalOcean works for me. So you can install their plugins, right like that, Vagrant plugin install, and it will install it. It's made by the DigitalOcean guys, so it works well. I've stripped down a lot of things in the file just for simplicity. But one of the things that you want to make sure is that you point out to your SSH key right here, and you name your host name. If you don't name your host name, you're going to get you're not going to recognize your box once you're on the DigitalOcean. And here I have another bit.ly. It points out to an image that is done by the DigitalOcean guys. That's required just to get going. And you have your key, your token for the API, different image, the image I want to use. So in this case, Ubuntu 14. You can get a list with their API or on their website. Different regions, so I provision in the SFO data center, and I provision a small virtual machine with 512 megs of RAM. And then my user for my SSH key. That's also defined on the DigitalOcean side. Now it's very simple. You just do Vagrant up, provider, DigitalOcean, and it's going to show you provisioning, and it's going to give you the IP address that it's assigned you. And you just go on DigitalOcean, or you just go to that IP address and start having fun. So that's pretty much my presentation. But before I leave, I want you to think about this. Don't automate things while you're learning Puppet, because you're going to make mistakes in production servers, most likely. Or if not on production servers, on developers' machines, because all the developers are now going to be running your Puppet manifest. And if you've done a big mistake, everybody is going to be like, oh, well, it's not working, and now you're going to be trying to fix it, or they're going to fix it before you. Which is great in a way. Start small. Start by automating small tasks, small things that takes a little bit of your time, but you know exactly how they work. And then iterate, build on top of it. Automate once, configure always. So write your Puppet manifest once and configure them. Don't hard code your things all over. You should use configuration files instead. We automate things to go faster. That's the main reason why we use Puppet in Vagrant. But going faster means you can go faster in the good direction and in the wrong direction. You can make mistakes much faster as well. I heard some stories that DevOps did a mistake and the company pretty much went kaput within 24 hours because they were all down. So be careful. You want to test your Puppet scripts before you run them. Have a lab to test your manifest. If you don't have multiple machines to test them on, you're going to do those mistakes. If you don't have that lab, well, it's simple. Go on DigitalOcean, create an account, takes 2 minutes, and try it there. It costs about $1 to have a small virtual machine. It costs $1 to have one virtual machine per day. You don't have to have that 64 gig virtual machine. So be careful about all the scripts and all the boxes you find on the internet. You have a responsibility. You can take any scripts that you find on the internet, run them, and it's probably at some point you're probably going to find that script that does that evil thing, and you're going to be sorry after. You don't want that to happen to you. So yeah, that's pretty much my presentation. My Twitter, email is there. So if you have any comments, feedback, you guys have been pretty quiet. Yes?
Is there a private way to store Vagrant boxes? Like if you spin up a Vagrant package of your own, do you have to host them on the public Vagrant site? Or
No, you can.
You just put it, you can actually upload it to the URL point?
Yeah, you can put it on any server, or you can put it on your private Git repository, for example, or a Git repo somewhere. Yeah, or even Dropbox. Some people do that.
Do you have to use VirtualBox?
No, you can use Vmware. Vmware is, it depends what school you're from, I guess.
Vagrant can also control AWS boxes, DigitalOcean boxes, and I do a lot of things.
For professional things, I would use VMware. I like to pay for software compared to other people, but that's me. Like, I work for money. Yeah?
What was, and maybe you missed it as well fast. If I wanted to have a code repo folder and link that into like a public HTML file or something like that folder in the Vagrant box, you can pass through folders, is that right?
Yeah, well, you have the shared folder that you can set up your things. And one thing I didn't mention is when you do your, when you're in the cloud, say, for example, DigitalOcean, when you do your Vagrant app, it's going to do your provisioning, but it's also going to rsync your shared folder. So it could be a good way to just, you just do Vagrant provision, and it it syncs all your code. B, it installs all your new dependencies related to that update. So for example, you have this code base that now requires ZeroMQ. Well, it's going to install ZeroMQ, and it's going to push all your code at the same time. So that's a pretty decent, actually. Obviously, today what I have shown is a masterless setup. You can also have a, I didn't mention it, but you can also have a master agent setup. But just for simplicity for now, that it works. But if you get a big setup, having a master agent setup is good. Any other questions? Yep.
How does Vagrant differ from like Docker and the like? Obviously, Vagrant is for a full virtual machine.
Yeah.
Is that the biggest difference versus like a Linux or like a container?
I never used Docker.
Oh, okay.
So I can't tell you.
Okay, cool.
I've used other systems, vSphere and things like that, but that's much more advanced. It's in the VMware private stack. Any other questions?
What's the biggest box you've ever used? Like how big can a box get without it being impossible to work with?
It's the same as if you packaged up a virtual machine. So however much stuff.
So a box doesn't really compress anything. There's no.
No.
There's no compression.
It's a tarball of your virtual machine with a.
It uses the compression of the provider. So however VirtualBox or VMware, whatever compresses them, that's what.
Oh, okay. Those. Okay. All right. Is there a limit to how big a box can be?
Whatever the limitation on your host OS.
Yeah. I mean, if you get that far, you move away from VirtualBox.
Right.
You know. All right, so this afternoon I'm giving a talk a bit different on 10 warning signs in IT projects at 3 o'clock. I invite you to come to this talk. It's not technical, but you're going to learn and hear funny stories, horror stories, and I'm going to give you tips on how to prevent those stories. So thank you for attending my talk, and see you this afternoon.